I think I could do like a bob, you know? Welcome back. This is a channel where I make fun of marketing because it's more gratifying than just about anything else I do. And today, rather than just mocking or analyzing brain-dead, soulless advertising, this video is going to be an attempt to feed your curiosity about marketing resistance by offering some resources. More specifically, I will be mentioning work that really got me thinking about the problems of marketing, or just resources that I've found really useful. And the last little note before we get started here, this video is also a collaboration with you. You specifically. You look lovely today. It's a great look. I don't know everything about this topic. I never will. So if you know of any good books or movies or creators or organizations that discuss marketing resistance or offer ways of combating marketing or thinking differently about marketing, please share them with us. All of us, we're on the same side here. That's part of what makes this so nice. And let's get started. Starting off with a controversial one, at least for me. I really did not want to include They Live, the John Carpenter classic that gave us some imagery that has become shorthand for, I think, power disparities and social critique, maybe even conspiracies, but that's part of the problem. If you're a younger person or just don't know this movie yet, it is about a homeless man who is accidentally awakened to subtext, basically. These not very stylish sunglasses let him see the true meaning and purpose of advertisements and mass media, and of course that purpose is to serve the interests of the ruling classes by controlling and influencing the general public. And in the movie, the ruling classes turn out to be aliens with weird, ugly faces, whereas in real life, these people are, the educated and or wealthy elite who benefit from centuries-old power structures that they consciously and unconsciously maintain by participating in them. So, in concept, They Live is a decent introduction to anti-marketing ideas, I suppose, theories, especially given the content of the most famous scene in the movie where the protagonist specifically uncovers the true nature of advertisements. He's looking at billboards, I think. That is very powerful and very useful imagery. However, I also think that this movie's reputation and identity in pop culture is kind of its own worst enemy. I've talked before about how I don't resonate with or support what I call the society man crowd, which I guess I define as like conspiracy vibes, lots of self-righteousness and worship of rhetoric-heavy debates that produce headlines like, or watch this corpo get absolutely destroyed by the power of logic, all caps. I think that's a perspective that is shaped by a few things. I think it's shaped by click-driven online discourse to begin with, and I also get the sense of like sort of stereotypically male zero-sum thinking that really valorizes forms of direct conflict where there's a winner and a loser. Tangent, sorry, but this is just really not a mindset that I want to encourage, and for whatever reason, people working within that mindset seem to absolutely love this movie. So I still recommend it, but I guess I would contextualize it as a stepping stone and not a destination. A much stronger recommendation, albeit a more challenging one, is the work of Noam Chomsky, a linguist by trade. He later expanded into political theory, philosophy, and activism. And maybe best of all, I think that his books and his lectures are ultra accessible in terms of availability and cost. So Manufacturing Consent might be his most famous work, and it is useful for this discussion, for this topic to a certain extent, though it's mainly about how mass media and sort of mainstream news in the US serves the interests of people in positions of power. But regarding marketing and advertising specifically, I think the book does a great job of explaining the normalization of corporate influence and the effects and benefits of corporate influence over the general public, as well as over, political leaders. There's a movie version of this as well, which is pretty easy to find, but if manufacturing consent is a bit too politically minded for you, there are also dozens of, well, probably hundreds, of Chomsky lectures on YouTube that discuss the sheer power and significance of the marketing industry, specifically in the United States. It's rare that he talks exclusively about marketing, but it does come up, I think, quite a bit in his discussions of power structures, especially in the US.
In fact, within the television industry, there are words called content and fill. Like a program has content and a program has fill. The content is the advertising. The fill is the car chase that's in there to keep you watching until the next ad comes along.
And in contrast to They Live and the mindset I was talking about earlier, I really appreciate that Chomsky's writing and public speaking intentionally avoid emotional appeals and rhetorical techniques. Even when he tells a joke during one of his talks, he just sort of rolls through it like it didn't even happen.
So I never went to class. But they got an A. It was okay. I actually had a friend who took notes. That helped.
And to me, that approach or that style is something that we could definitely use more of. And to sum up, I think a good takeaway from his comments on the marketing industry is that despite its size, scope, and revenue, it's generally ignored. Like lots of other major industries are subjected to some kind of scrutiny or some kind of public discussion, but marketing seems to skate by, and it really, really shouldn't. Thank you, Pokemon Go. It's Cyndaquil time. Oh, man, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. Hang on, I was saying something about corporate influence. Oh my gosh. This will be a short one, but composer, software designer, and YouTuber Tantacrul, not the Pokemon, but close, has made some really fantastic videos examining how music gets deployed in different contexts for different reasons, and the most relevant video to this topic is one called Corporate Music: How to Compose with No Soul. It combines music theory with political thought to deconstruct major trends in the realm of advertising music, which I think is such at the same time, it's a really niche topic, but also one that is so interesting, and I don't think I've really seen it discussed anywhere else.
And it's in this spirit I want to return to corporate music, which I think of as the audio equivalent of the workspace hive mind. It can't be too artistic or experimental, and it needs to keep things nice and sensible. Internal workplace music tends to be an empty husk, only dealing with the most conventional and surface-level cliches while actively avoiding edginess or unpredictability. It resembles the environment it was created in.
The video is great in its own right, but I also feel that it offers a gateway into the much larger topic of how advertising co-opts various art forms, as well as artists, to sell stuff, and in the process, drains them of artistic value. Moving on, told you it was a quick one. Ways of Seeing is a rather famous TV series, or I guess what we would now call like a limited series, a limited television event, like the Knuckles Show. By the way, the Knuckles Show is kind of worth checking out. Ways of Seeing was on BBC. It was 4 episodes of 30 minutes each, and it was written by a guy called John Berger, who's dead now. As with quite a few of the resources I'm mentioning in this video, the whole work here is not specific to the subject of advertising. It's episode 4. That's the one you want. Episode 4 is the one about advertising, or as Berger puts it, publicity, which I guess is British for advertising.
Publicity proposes to each of us in a consumer society that we change ourselves or our lives by buying something more. This more, publicity persuades us, will make us in some way richer, even though we will be poorer by having spent our money.
Just as the Tantacrul video analyzes how music is made to perform a function that serves corporate interests, Ways of Seeing episode 4 analyzes how the image is made to do the exact same thing. I also really appreciate the historical dimension that this adds to the discussion of contemporary marketing. The episode isn't especially complicated or hard to follow. You do have to pay attention, follow the line of thinking. That's all, but it's very little to ask, I think. And yes, it's on YouTube, so just it's right there. Just another tab or something, you're good to go. Okay, the most challenging anti-marketing resource is also probably the most powerful. And it's not a specific work, but rather a whole category of work, which is research journals and academic writing. So remember back in high school when you had to use the library computers to look up sources on like JSTOR and ResearchGate, Google Scholar, to write an essay on, I don't know, the popular fashions of the Industrial Revolution or something like that. Well, those resources still exist, even if you're not in school anymore, and there's a whole lot of work covering marketing history, tactics, and trends. Because marketing as a whole is such a massive moneymaker, there are lots of people who earn their livings conducting intensive research to uncover the most effective ways of manipulating people into buying stuff. And this stuff is extremely useful for someone who wants to learn more about how the industry operates and how their tactics can be dodged. But on top of all of that, it's pretty funny to me. And I guess I should clarify, the work itself is not funny. It's very depressing to me, but the big picture here, the fact that so much of this is available to the public is hilarious. Because, I don't know, like on a website, for example, in a place where an ad agency thinks that people might actually see it or might actually pay attention, they're very careful to describe what they do and how they do it, and it's obscured behind very carefully chosen language and copy and everything. But meanwhile, in places where they don't think people are paying any real attention, they don't obscure anything at all. They speak very plainly about what they're trying to do and how they're trying to do it. For the most part, they're probably right. Most of us do not spend our time reading industry-specific research journals. And besides, the journals and papers that are not publicly accessible for free are extremely expensive. So, in other words, they're not worried about people seeing this stuff, but they absolutely should be, because it's telling us exactly what they're trying to do, which also tells us how to mess with them. It's such a gift. But there's even more, because in addition to researchers who are specifically trying to support marketing activities, there are also researchers who are looking to counter marketing activities or comment on the harm that is caused by brands and corporations, etc. This paper here is one of my favorites, all about how industries that are causing actual obvious harm adjust their PR based on the degree to which the general public has accepted that these industries genuinely suck. Anyway, as I've already hinted at, the accessibility of research papers depends on the publisher and potentially on sources of funding. A shocking amount is available with no strings attached, no account or credit card required, but plenty is still paywalled for the reasons I mentioned earlier. The exception is if you're a student. High school, college, graduate school, you probably have a lot of access to these resources, even if you have to go out of your way to ask for it. And I'll close out with something that I found very recently, just while writing the script actually, and I think it provides a very useful perspective. So once again, this is not exclusively about advertising. As you can tell from the title, it's mainly about consumerism and views of consumerism. But regardless, Willis says some really fantastic things about elitist views of advertising and consumerism. To paraphrase heavily, she talks about how critics of consumerism and advertising can be very proud of themselves for being able to sort of see through the charade of marketing, while at the same time they seem to think that the oppressed lower classes are just permanently brainwashed and therefore can't rise above the appeals of ads and their associated products. This essay was written back in 1970, but I think that it's still dead on. I've definitely observed that attitude in recent years, and I try my best to avoid anything approaching that tone in my videos, mostly because, well, for one, I don't think that condescending to people is helpful, and besides that, I don't actually believe that most people are just too stupid to change things or to want change, or to understand that they're being manipulated. I don't think that's the case. Willis also gives us a pretty good explanation of why people continue to buy stuff despite knowing that advertising is worthless. And it's a conclusion that I've maintained here since the very first video. Buying stuff is genuinely fun. It is a fun thing to do. It feels good, especially in the absence of more fulfilling pursuits. Here's a direct quote. "The pleasure of eating an ice cream cone may be minor compared to the pleasure of meaningful, autonomous work, but the former is easily available and the latter is not. A poor family would undoubtedly rather have a decent apartment than a new TV, but since they are unlikely to get the apartment, what is to be gained by not getting the TV?" For me, this essay is a great counterpoint to red pill narratives, I suppose. The idea that you can have some kind of revelation that just sets you apart from most other people, and that after that revelation you don't really need to grow or change anymore. Now, I don't agree with the essay's sort of closing comment that consumerism is not a problem that needs to be actively dealt with. On the one hand, I do agree that basically every other social movement is fundamentally more important than anti-consumerism or anti-marketing, but I do feel that it's definitely still worth attention and thought and criticism. So while writing this script, I was trying to think of my radicalizing moment, I guess we could call it. More than any of the work that I've mentioned here, what was it that pushed me over the edge where marketing is concerned? And really, there are probably a whole bunch of those moments, but there's one in particular that I remember very clearly. So I was at the big Power Rangers convention, Power Morphicon, and I was waiting in line for Jason David Frank's his photos and autograph stuff, and I did end up embarrassing myself in front of him, and then he died a little while afterwards, probably unrelated, but RIP just the same. So I was in line for a few hours, right? And among the line people were a mom and her kid, relatively young mom, relatively young kid. I don't know kid ages. I don't know what they're supposed to look like. I'm gonna say 4 or 5, I guess. Let's go with that. And the kid had the mom's phone, clearly just for something to do. Just some kind of entertainment. The kid has nothing else going on. I totally get it. I would probably do the same thing. And the kid happened to be on Instagram. I don't think that was the mom's intention, but that's what was going on when I started paying attention to the whole situation. And the kid was scrolling through it like any of us would, and I could see all of the ads that the kid was seeing. And something about the specific combination really bothered me. A kid looking at ads clearly designed for adults. It's not about parenting here. It was about the broader implication, because in the modern world, I think it would be basically impossible to prevent your kid from seeing just as many ads as you do, like all the time, in every public space and even at home. And more broadly than that, I hated the idea that none of us, regardless of age, situation, whatever, can really effectively avoid ads without maybe, being one of those jerks who pretends to drop out of society. And this was upsetting to me specifically because the Instagram ads were junk, as you would expect. They were just gross. And here's this kid whose brain is working at top speed to understand the world around it, and it is absorbing ads designed to be attention grabbing on a basic sensory level, just to sell, like, I don't know, soda. Was seltzer big at the time? Probably. Selling pants. There might have been some pants ads on there. That moment didn't give me answers, I didn't suddenly have great plans for how advertising could be subverted or overcome or anything like that. But it did make me feel very tired of pretending that the realities of advertising just need to be accepted by default. out of sheer exhaustion, I guess. And rather than replicating my experience, I hope that the resources I've talked about here and the ones that we come up with in the comments help you to suss out your own feelings on all of this stuff. And beyond that, if it helps to hear someone complain about the brain pollution of advertising, feel free to swing by the channel again. I'll be happy to have you. Thank you so much for watching the whole video. Here we are, first video in the new place. Did a lot of messing around with different camera setups, but I hope that this one is at least acceptable. Not too much else for you today. The next video is in the works. It is focused on a specific type of advertising. I'm pretty excited about it, despite kind of the depressing subject matter. But that's par for the course here. But I think that's all. I'll let you go. Happy summer. I hope you find plenty of time to just do nothing at all. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Take care.